everyone. Welcome to the Packer Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Herrick, and I sit down with leaders and disruptors in the fresh produce industry who are reimagining how we grow, move, and deliver fruits and vegetables in a changing world. And joining me today is Cam Quarles, CEO of the National Potato Council. Thanks for joining me, Cam.
Hey, Christina, good to see you. How are you?
It's good. I'm doing just fine. It's hard for me to believe that it's been almost 2 months since the Potato Expo. I mean, feels like yesterday, feels like 3 years ago, all at once, which I feel like is just the way this year's going.
Yeah, it was pretty great. We were really glad that you were there, and for Jared Balcom, who's one of our former presidents of the National Potato Council, to get the Packer Potato Person of the Year award. That was pretty cool. We had a good time down in Dallas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we really surprised him. I mean, maybe not at the end, as you had to kind of shuttle him into the area where we were presenting the award, but I still think he was a little speechless and surprised. So that's always a good thing. We like to keep our award winners on their toes. So yeah, and obviously I wanted to bring you on to talk a little bit because National Potato Council, you just had your big DC event,
Mhm.
and there's obviously a lot going on in DC. And I know we talked about the Farm Bill for a story, but I really wanted to have you on to kind of talk about everything afterward, right? Because I think that's what makes those Hill Days really interesting, is just the conversations and everything like that. So maybe give me like a snapshot. So, you were in DC with hundreds and hundreds of growers, and obviously there were a lot of ag groups in DC last week. So maybe give us a snapshot. Like, what's their mindset? What's everyone's mindset going into this year?
Yeah, so it had a long week. I actually began the week down in Florida. We have a great leadership program that we run every year. We start out in a production area and then end up in DC. So I met with our young leaders, traveled to DC, and then, as you said, we had well over 100 growers here, and I think the things that were really top of mind for them are, it's very, this is not breaking news, it's very difficult economic times for not just the potato industry but across US agriculture. I think everyone is very focused on meeting with their members of Congress, explaining the environment right now, why it's so dire, and then hearing from those House and Senate members. Uh, what's the timing on an economic relief plan? What does it look like? What's the size of it? How ultimately is that going to get out to family farms to keep them in business, hopefully to get past this really ugly period?
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I mean, obviously, it's no secret to anyone that's on this podcast that that's part of why I wanted to work on an economic series. And obviously, I've only had one story out, and probably not two by the time this podcast goes out. But I'm working on it because it is a unique time. Obviously, it's not something you I want to write about. I'm not excited about it, but I feel like it's important that we really talk about it, discuss it. Instead of kind of just painting a rosy picture, I think we need to be realistic, because I think that's how that's how things will actually get better, is if we vocalize how things are. Same with labor. I feel like having those conversations, making them top of mind, is really important, because as you kind of alluded to, being in DC, there's a lot of different viewpoints that come in and advocate for their industries. So I feel like ag needs to do that. Obviously, I'm sure the conversation in DC also is a lot about the Farm Bill, and I know we spoke, like I said in the beginning, we spoke about the introduction of the draft of the Farm Bill. So maybe talk about those conversations that you had with the potato growers, and then also with those members of Congress in DC about the draft. Is there anything that stood out? Anything that those conversations kind of really wanted to emphasize and point out. Maybe talk about the Farm Bill and just kind of those conversations had in DC.
I think the initial feeling that we have about what Chairman Thompson is doing in the House, and hopefully it appears that that's going to get matched in the Senate as well. They're starting this very important process. If you never have a markup, You're not going to get to the president's desk. You've got to kick this off. I think Chairman Thompson, the potato industry has worked really closely with all of our specialty crop colleagues under this great mechanism, this great organization, the Specialty Crop Farm Bill Alliance. And over the last 20 years, specialty crops, the U.S. fruit and vegetable industry, has that we've gone from a really non-existent in the Farm Bill to one of the fastest growing players in the Farm Bill, and really one of the most valuable connections directly back to consumers from the production ag side of the Farm Bill. So I think there's a lot of value there. What Chairman Thompson has put out is going to start getting marked up here actually this afternoon, this evening. Um, it really reflects a lot of those priorities of the Specialty Crop Farm Bill Alliance. And one thing to highlight also, Chairman Thompson took the additional step on economic relief that we were just talking about. He took the additional step of putting a provision in this bill that says USDA, this is how you deliver economic relief to the specialty crop industry. We're going to take the programs that have worked in the past, and we are going to just basically call that debate to a close. Specialty crops are different than program crops, and why reinvent the wheel? Just rinse and repeat. Make sure the programs that have worked, that have kept family farms in business, you reload them with new resources, and you get it out the door efficiently. So a lot of credit to the chairman and the staff there for doing that. Also, just like to highlight a few things. Crop insurance, getting new tools to producers, specialty crop producers, for things like whole farm revenue insurance, making sure that it's affordable as well as effective for those farms. That in the future will be a huge benefit that may alleviate or partially alleviate the need for these big economic relief packages. If you got the tools available to better manage your own risk, your farm is in a much safer, more economically viable position. Also, research, mechanization, AI, helping our very valuable labor force be more efficient, I think is going to be a tremendous value to this industry. So we're really looking forward. Again, the current farm bill we're under, it's looking basically a decade back in history as to what agriculture looked like at that time. We need a reauthorized farm bill right now that is looking not only at our current circumstances, but hopefully 10 years out in the future. This is an incredibly competitive world that we are in. Our producers are feeling it, and they need tools that empower their competitiveness rather than kind of hold them back to a world that really doesn't exist anymore.
Absolutely. And I think that's interesting. And again, we talked about this when the draft was just introduced, is kind of the farm bill cycle may change. As you kind of alluded to. It's gotta be one of those things where it's not a shorter cycle farm bill, really looking ahead to the future. So I think that's really interesting and it's really important. And obviously research is incredibly important to the future of the industry as things keep changing and as there's needs for, as you pointed to, automation and technology, but just everything else that comes along with growing. I think being able to have that money for research is a critical part of the future of the industry. So, we kind of started off the conversation talking about kind of the challenges, right, that the specialty crop industry is facing. Um, are there any unseen like causes or sources of friction that you think like the average consumer or, since you were in DC, those conversations with legislators, some that obviously have an ag background or in represent more ag related communities and some that don't, so talk about that. Is there anything that they're missing? Anything that we, this is the royal we, the whole fresh produce industry, really need to be kind of talking about more, bringing attention to, as we're kind of building this momentum to potentially see some legislative relief?
Yeah, I think, kind of contrast this with 6 years ago when we were dealing with COVID. The causes of the crisis during COVID were pretty obvious. I mean, you shut down a huge amount of the U.S. economy kind of overnight, and so you didn't have to do a whole lot of explaining about why that crisis existed. This one's different. It is an equal, if not more, impactful crisis for producers, but it comes from a more of a layered kind of perfect storm of what we're facing. I would say first off, you do have challenges just with inflation across the board. We've seen prices rising for a substantial period of time. Lay on top of that, if you're sourcing, and a lot of producers have to source fundamental inputs from overseas. Those industries just don't exist in the United States anymore. So if you're buying from overseas, those products, because of tariffs as well as inflation, they have gone up in price. You also have, this is particularly acute for the specialty crop industry, to the extent that you are labor dependent. The all of the security that has gone into the southern border. It is great to have that southern border secure, but the follow on effect of that is it constrains the supply of labor here in the United States, and that constraint of that supply is causing an impact. It's causing producers the cost of labor to skyrocket. So layer that on top. Um, you also have a lot of it. It's hard to say that we had perfect growing conditions last year, but it was as close to perfect across the United States that as you could get, and that results in larger than average crops. So put all that together, make it simple. You have a larger than average crop that was very expensive to produce, and then you have consumers on the other side who are pulling back on some of their purchases. They're seeing a more volatile world, and so demand has been shrinking, and all of these have caused this collision where for potatoes, just in the russet variety alone, we're looking at potentially $500 million in grower losses. American Farm Bureau did an analysis of the entire all of the varieties of potatoes out there. They're estimating roughly $780 million in grower losses this year, and so extrapolate that out across all of the specialty crops, and the gravity of this crisis comes into focus pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I'm gonna borrow from John Devaney, who I talked to for my economic story. He kind of talked about it as being stung by bees, right? It's not necessarily just one particular bee that's really stinging. It's basically the whole of the hive that's really causing some of this. And yes, there are maybe bees that might be larger and sting harder, but it's kind of that whole collective sting that's really impacting growers, and it's tough. It's No one wants to see this. I mean, I don't think there's anyone on this that's watching this that's rooting for these type of things to happen. It's just unfortunate that it's hitting, and it's hitting with the kind of consequences that I feel like it is for growers.
Yeah, it is, and I think one thing to point out for folks who have said, look, you've gotten fundamental changes in tax policy that clearly went through last summer in the reconciliation bill, the one big beautiful bill. You've got these trade agreements that are coming online. Those two things are pretty significant, and those are going to change the economic environment for agriculture and specifically specialty crops. All of that may be true, but it's what happens in the interim. Right, we're dealing with the present, and out in the future those policies are going to take effect. If family farms go bankrupt in that interim, none of those policy improvements are going to impact them. They're out of the game. And that's exactly what we want to avoid. That's why this economic relief program is so important, to deliver it efficiently, to keep those really valuable family farms in the game until better times are realized.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I wish in a perfect world, I'd much rather be having these conversations with everyone in a brighter outlook. But like I said, I feel like it's important to have the tough conversations and to really vocalize what's going on. As everyone is trying to do in this industry. Just in order to bring relief. It's that squeaky wheel. You've got to make sure that you're you're squeaky because there's a lot that could pull attention away from those that can really help bring relief. So I know we talked a little bit about kind of like grower mindset going into the trip and being in DC, but I also know that the National Potato Council is working on their spud sector survey. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that. Is there any like nuggets? Again, I'm sure some of the mindset of growers is reflected in some of the comments that you've already had, but give me a snapshot of that. Is there anything that they're telling you that's not showing up in the survey? Maybe just point out some things that you found really interesting in those findings.
Yeah, I think first of all, we had fantastic participation from across the industry. We were actually, when we were down in Dallas at our Potato Expo, and we had well over 2,000 people there. We were really reaching out to our growers to encourage them to participate. We got great response rate, and so very interesting information that was generated from that. Um, I think the top line for all of us was how important this economic relief plan is to family farms. 94% of our respondents said that those type of programs, the ones that have been delivered in the past, CFAP 2, mask, those kind of things, were really important to their operations. So that's one of the reasons we're doubling down on that. I think it was also interesting, and this is a little bit of a reflection, kind of when you're talking about people's views of Congress versus their own congressman. Um, there was some pessimism from growers about the prospects for U.S. agriculture overall in this currently very volatile environment, but they were much more positive on their own farm going into the future. And that's very similar to when you see people polled about Congress, and they'll say, well, I don't like Congress, but my congressman's great. And it's kind of where you sit is where you stand. All politics being local, the work that you do that's right in front of you has a little bit more connection, and a little bit more, you have a little bit more grace with that than stuff that is kind of farther out in the distance.
That's really interesting. And obviously, I'm not saying anything that you would know, otherwise you wouldn't do the survey. But it's nice to have some of that data showing some of the benefits of programs, because then you've got that information to then share as you're talking with folks in DC. Because I know that while you had your big DC visit and Hill Day, that's not the only time you're having those visits and conversations. So it's nice to have that data that then go back and say our growers see this is important, and have those data points. I want to talk trade because you had mentioned trade.
Mhm.
So are there things about Japan? Where are things with trade now? And are there some? I know that there's a lot of work being done to open new markets. So maybe give us a snapshot of where things are and where things are hopefully headed.
Yeah, we've heard a succession of announcements from the Trump administration, most recently on Taiwan, where they've had very successful negotiations, effectively zeroed all tariffs out on the various potato lines, both processed as well as fresh product that would go into Taiwan. That's a huge benefit. We've been sitting there with tariffs in Taiwan where our competitors have had lower or no rates. And so we've really been at a disadvantage in that market. It's great to have those wiped out. Similarly, you mentioned Japan. The president's tariff strategy has created a unique moment in time where I think we can break past some of this protectionism in Japan. Again, for our industry, you're talking about if we can get that market open, fully open, you're looking about $150 million a year in new US ag exports. That's a huge benefit to the Trump administration in wanting to chip away at this ag trade deficit. Massive deal for our family farms. The tailwind that that type of market would put under our industry is just tremendous. And so we're very excited about those opportunities. Ultimately, you got to get them to the finish line, though. The new Japanese Prime Minister will be here in town in a couple of weeks, and we're very hopeful that the president raises this issue directly with her during their meetings. If we can get that open, just that would be a massive victory for the Trump administration as well as our growers. A little bit of a complicating factor is a lot of these a lot of these beneficial trade agreements have been empowered by the leverage generated by the president's tariff strategy. Given what happened with the Supreme Court ruling a couple of weeks ago, it's unclear how much of that leverage is going to be able to be deployed in the future. Obviously, we want to see trade agreements that impact positively the competitiveness of our American producers, and we're very hopeful that a lot of these things can get to the finish line.
Yes, and I know there's been a significant amount of work to get even get to where you are right now, in terms of visits, conversations. So yes, but to your point with all of this, same with Farmville, same with everything, it proof is in the pudding. You've really got to get these to be signed or put in place in order to have the impact. So no, the industry I know knows that we can't take our eye off the ball and really need to get things over the finish line. So yeah.
Well
Um,
said. Yep.
well, kind of. I kind of wanted to end, and I was trying to come up with like a some kind of question to kind of wrap up everything that we talked about. And so I was really thinking about kind of like your experience of being in DC and working with growers and advocating for the industry. Is there anything in particular that you've learned from working with these growers, maybe that you didn't pick up while you were in those conversations in DC? Is there anything leadership wise or perspective or anything that kind of when you're going in to advocate for the industry that you bring into those conversations?
Yeah, a couple of things, and I'll take it, kind of specifically on the potato industry, and then draw it a little wide with the larger specialty crop industry. I am very fortunate to be able to represent the U.S. potato growers. We are the most widely produced vegetable in the United States. We have a huge production footprint, allows us to go into a lot of Senate offices, a lot of House districts, and we've got folks all over the country that are able to make their case on really important issues. Our effectiveness there, though, requires us to all be on the same sheet of music. We all have to be pushing the same point. If we go off and start chasing squirrels all over the place, we lose that leverage, that effectiveness. The specialty crop industry has taken that even farther, and I have to tell you the value that the Specialty Crop Farm Bill Alliance has delivered to this industry over the last 20 years, all of us being on the same page, working together, having that muscle memory, and even expanding that farm bill work out to things like these economic crises. Having the US industry all on the same sheet of music, all focused on a single goal, has delivered massive results for an industry that really just wasn't a major player 2 decades or so ago. They had to kind of go it on their own, and the benefits that growers are receiving from all of that focused effort, all of that collaboration, it's tremendous. And I think we just need to keep doing that in an even more disciplined way in the future.
Absolutely. And, again, we've talked about this, and it is interesting when you think about it. You kind of boil down the specialty crop industry, and I could see where it would be very easy for each individual commodity to have its own needs and wants, because the industry is so diverse. It's kind of tough to boil that down. But to your point, bringing everyone together, kind of having unified needs, asks, talking points, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, really helps bring benefit. And you've pointed to just the successes that you've seen. And I think it's beneficial. I always felt like, and especially when I started in the fresh produce industry, and I know work was being done to get us to where we are now, but I always kind of felt like specialty crops felt like an afterthought. And I really don't feel like that as much anymore. I think the industry is doing a fantastic job of just talking about its importance within what we eat, and just also as an export as well. So it's really interesting to see, as you said, those benefits just continue to help the industry grow, and bring benefits to growers as well.
I think you're exactly right. And just as a data point to validate what you just said, Christina, when you look at the press releases that have gone out multiple times on the Farm Bill,
Yeah.
specialty crops, they're not an afterthought. They're in the lead paragraph. Um, our our value, both to consumers as well as to the leadership in the House and Senate Ag committees has really grown, and we've made that case. And now we're not just kind of the little brother out there who's not getting a lot of attention. Now we're a major player at the table, and that's all of that is credit to this industry working together.
Absolutely. Well, at this point in the podcast, I always say that we either finish the easy questions, or we finish the hard questions, depending upon how you look at them. So, it's going to ask you. I can't have you come on the podcast without asking a couple of fresh take questions. So, um, we'll see where these go. I think they're always fun. So,
I'll brace
um,
myself.
Okay. Hopefully, yeah, that's what I mean. I think these might be the harder ones for most everyone, since we talk fresh produce. But um, okay, big game, big day, and event. What's your walk-up song or walk-up songs?
Oh, huh. So, well, it changes. It depends on the day. Sometimes it's, the Imperial March. It's like Darth Vader when I go up to the podium. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's don't worry, be happy. uh, and yeah, sometimes it might be, so some people are not thrilled with Washington lobbyists, and that's what I do. That's what I make my money doing. So I guess sometimes it might be sympathy for the devil. So pick one of those three, and you got it.
I love that. It's too bad this didn't come out before the actual hill visits. I could see somebody having the Imperial March on their phone and like playing it as you're walking through the halls. Um, no, that's great. And I love that answer, because I think you're right. It does depend on the mood and the day and just what you're doing. Right. So if you could have a 30-minute sit down with any historical figure, you're not going to talk shop, not going to talk potatoes, but just have a conversation. Who would you pick?
I would have to say there's a lot of names popping through my head, but I would have to say it would be Abraham Lincoln, and because he was someone who was obviously dealing with crisis after crisis, and he also had some relatively challenging personalities to deal with, both amongst his detractors as well as his allies, and he figured out a way to manage all of that. And his dealing with, we often say that this is a time of real volatility, and you got a lot of upset people, and we've never been more divided as a country. Well, we were pretty divided when we were killing, thousands and thousands of our neighbors in the Civil War. I think his ability to lead, to articulate a message and to ultimately get the country through. He obviously wasn't there to see the results of his actions, but to get the country through that crisis into a better place, I think that would be a fascinating historical figure to learn a little bit from.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, especially the way that you explained it. I mean, I think that's yeah. I was as you were talking, I thought, if if he was in um today's modern era, I can't tell you probably how many leadership books he probably would have written by now. But yeah, I think that'd be fascinating. And again, that's the fun part about this question. All right. So, personal bucket list. Nothing to do with potatoes, nothing to do with DC. What's one thing on your personal bucket list?
Oh, well, so my this will come as no shock to my wife and my daughter. So during COVID, I got my pilot's license, and I'd always wanted to do that because, but I couldn't do it because I was always traveling too much. And finally, I wasn't going to be traveling for a period of time, so I got my pilot's license. If I was able to do one more thing, I would love to have my own plane and be able to fly my wife and daughter around all over the United States. That would be a ton of fun. Right now, my daughter goes to the University of Southern California, so all of my flying money has flown to tuition in Los Angeles.
Yeah, but I'm sure too, it's interesting having a pilot's license. I mean, yes, you're not flying a commercial plane, but I bet there are times where you're in an airport and you go, I just wish I had a plane and I could just hop to where I need to be way faster than, sitting through this delay or sitting through this layover. So, yeah, I bet that's really interesting. Well, you never know that there's still time. So, but as you said, you might be diverting those plane dollars to tuition right now. So,
Yeah, there I am, and you're right. I have that thought in my head about 100 times between the time I enter an airport until I actually exit the airport. So yes, I am. That has crossed my mind before. That
I
I could do it a lot faster.
I guess that's the benefit to me is I know I would be a horrible pilot. So I'm not thinking that, but I do think that sometimes walking versus running, since I run so much, I'm like, well, this would be so much faster if I just ran there. So anyway, I think that's really fascinating. But thank you so much, Cam, for joining me. I guess we've talked so much, I'm about to lose my voice. So I better wrap this up.
Well, we better do it. But thanks a lot for having me, Christine. It's always great to see you, and we'll look forward to hopefully a reauthorized farm bill and all these other things here in the next few months.
Yes, and I hope, we'll connect then. It's probably I don't know when I'll see you in person again, but hopefully we'll connect at least via Zoom or something. So, thank you again for joining me and thank you to everyone for tuning in. And don't forget if you like what you hear, you can catch new episodes of the Packer podcast on your favorite platform. And don't forget to take a moment to rate and review the show as well. And thank you for tuning in and for all you do to keep fresh produce moving from field to table. Bye.